Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a joy to be with you as we're continuing this conversation about a lie too big to fail, the real history of the assassination of Robert Kennedy Jr. Why is that important as we look at the King assassinations, as we now are living in a moment when Malcolm X's children are suing the FBI and the CIA to find out what happened to their father? And the
Hmm.
NYPD, they said, we get it. Everybody was in it. We want to know who did what. And they have the right to ask. I know my father, having worked for Dr. King for years, they tried to get at what happened. This little motel that was on the edge of the city of Memphis, across just a few blocks away from West Memphis, Arkansas, all the lights went green between the motel, the Lorraine Motel in West Memphis, Arkansas, and a petty thief gets caught in London.
Yeah, yeah.
Come on, come on. And we could just keep on going. And the Robert Kennedy assassination, we're closer to it because Robert Kennedy Jr. has had the courage to name names and to doggedly pursue this. And I don't fault the rest of his family for kind of standing down because I don't know what that's about. I have my feelings, my thoughts, and we'll talk about that Lisa Pease, who has done this tremendous work. And as she has said, it's all right there.
It's in the
It's in
files.
it's in the files, but no one's
Yeah.
touching them. And so and there were a lot of eyes there. There were a lot of people who were there. And if you break down these tapes and listen to the sound in 2024, you can know what happened.
Hmm.
I just had the simple question: how is it that someone who was in front of him has been held guilty? I mean, is considered guilty in the court of public opinion when he was shot from behind and he was shot in the head, and all the pictures of we see of his assassination, he's bleeding from the back of his
From the
head.
back.
Everybody knows something. His brother, the front of his head was blown off.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm just saying, I think we need to know, everybody. We need to know. I don't think we've known enough about what happened with President elect Donald Trump. That happened in our eyes. And, some people said, okay, he pumped his fist. When you step into this arena, everybody, you are very clear that you might not make it out. And you have to make peace with that.
Hmm.
I've lived here. I know it. You just know that, as my father would say, death is not the worst thing that can happen to you, honey. Not living and being a coward is the worst thing. I've heard Robert Kennedy say something similar, Robert Kennedy Jr., when people have said, you're putting your life on the line. He said, yeah, my dying is not the worst thing. It's being enslaved, not pursuing the truth, not feeling free, not living. So, in this time when we do not trust anybody to tell us anything, and now, what can you say? 4 years ago, CNN on election night had 13.3 million viewers. They barely went over 800,000 this year. Something, everybody. I
Wow.
think
Wow.
if somebody starts telling the truth, it can save the country. So I bring to you once
Mm.
again Lisa Pease, the author of the book A Lie Too Big to Fail. Put it under your Christmas tree. It's it's the history of the assassination of Robert Kennedy Jr. You need to read it because all of this information is right before us. Please go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Ashley King down there in Memphis, sending you so much love, and we're going to support TSU. I'm going to get Dr. Glover on here, I promise, so we can talk about it. Because our HBCUs are owed, the land grant colleges are owed more than $15 billion, and they're not getting their money. And we're cutting checks to Ukraine left and right, right and left. Come on. So let's talk about it, everybody. Please go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Go to the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. That's the only page where I can accept friends. I'm on X, the Santita Jackson Show, or at Santita J. That's really where I am. And I'm now on Blue Sky at santitajackson.bsky.social. So, Lisa Pease, let us get right into it. Part two. You have been taking us through what happened with this. You were helping us to understand, to contextualize Robert Kennedy and who he was in 1968 and all of the hopes and the dreams. It was like he was like
Just a minute. I am so sorry, but
no,
somebody
no,
is
it's
ringing
okay.
my doorbell.
It's all
This
right.
never happens.
Well, that's okay.
So
You know what?
I
I'm
better
going to
come
hold it
back.
right here. Of
I'll be right
course.
back. Oh my gosh. Oh,
It's
yeah, don't end
okay.
it.
Okay, okay.
Who's there?
And we are witnessing everything. How about that?
Hello? Hello? Yes. Don't come back. Thanks.
Is everything okay?
Yeah. He's just going door to door. I'm not sure what for. Oh, that's good. It's a little scary.
Was it the police?
No, but you never know these days.
Okay. Okay.
Oh my God. Life is weird. Yes. And yeah, everything you're saying is so important. I think the reason Trump got elected is because people know they're being lied to. And so they're going to blame who's ever in office, as being the ultimate liar. And,
Well, so
in
many
my
of them don't
opinion,
tell the
Trump
truth.
isn't telling the truth either, but people are going to have to find that out the hard way. And
Well, we're
it's
finding
just,
out the hard way, like now, right? I mean,
yeah,
every time, I mean, no one is standing on truth, and that is what's very
yeah,
painful because
yeah.
I see
Well, the
with
truth
the
rarely sells, I think, especially when you're running for office. People often don't want to hear the truth. They just want to hear everything's going to be better. But there are real forces in this country who keep the truth from coming out. Now, here's the thing. If it was just Sirhan, we've already proven it couldn't have been. But let's say it was just Sirhan and one other person. You would think the truth would have come out by now, right? If it was somebody not connected with the government, there'd be no reason to have this huge cover up when the evidence is so obvious. But the
why?
fact that
Who in whose interest is it for there to be for the truth not to be revealed?
anybody either still living and involved or any agency still operating and that was involved. So, it is my strong belief and the thesis of my book that I feel like I've proven by the end of it that the CIA was deeply involved in this case. And one of the reasons for that goes to something we haven't even touched on yet. And I do want to talk about that. You alluded to the fact earlier in the previous hour that Sirhan had no memory. This has always been a sticking point. And right immediately after the crime, I mean, his mother went down to see him in the jail, and his brother, and I've talked to the brother, and he's like, the mom asked him, what happened? He's like, I don't remember. I really don't remember. And they knew he wasn't lying. They knew he couldn't remember. Even the police knew he wasn't lying. There's a Sergeant Jordan who was interviewing him immediately afterwards for like 4 hours on and off. And when new people would come into the room, he would say, if he says he doesn't remember, he really doesn't remember. He said, he's not putting us on. And at one point, they asked him, like, what kind of car did you drive? And he's like, I don't know. They asked him, are you married? And he said, I don't remember. How do you not remember if you're married or not? These aren't lies somebody would tell. This is somebody who truly, in my opinion, and again in the opinion of most researchers, in a hypnotic lock. All right, and the hypnotism is something we have to talk about because it's not only this case. I think if we look into the history of every mass murderer in this country, I think we're going to find a mind control aspect, a hypnosis aspect there. When we say mind control, the CIA had a very well-known program called MK Ultra but it had many lesser well-known programs like MK Naomi, MK Delta. Bluebird was one that was a joint program with the CIA and the Air Force and the Navy. And the Navy had its own projects. And then there was Project Chickweed and QK Hilltop. There are a number of documented mind control programs by the CIA and the military, and some of them working in connection with each other. And here's one of the things: if you, I went to as many hypnosis shows as I could find for like the period of about 2 years, and I saw like stage shows, and I would see county fairs and close-up demonstrations, and because I wanted to try and understand how it worked. And the time I understood it the best was when I got, well, two times. I'll go to the first one. I'm so sorry, and I did bring water here. All right, so the first time that kind of cracked my mind open was when I got to see somebody immediately after a show, after he had been hypnotized on stage. The hypnotist had said during the show, he's like, don't talk to these people until tomorrow, kind of, when they come off, don't spend too much time with them today, because he's like, they'll still be kind of in the hypnosis. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And so as soon as one of the guys went off the stage and went up to his friends, I tried to get as close as I could without being obvious to eavesdrop. And they were joking about what he had done, because the hypnotist had made him propose to his longtime girlfriend, who he wouldn't actually propose to, not under hypnosis. And he's like, I didn't do that. And they're like, yeah, you did, and we have it on tape. He had no memory. He didn't think he had been hypnotized. He's like, what are you talking about? And this is, so the lack of memory from hypnosis is ordinary. It's actually very common that when people come out of, and I'm not talking a light hypnosis, because some people are only mildly hypnotized and they're very aware of everything and they have no memory loss. But when somebody is truly under, and when you see what these stage shows, they only want to use the people who can be truly under, because they're more fun to manipulate for the hypnotist and for the crowd to laugh at. Which, by the way, I found those shows very disturbing too. But the guy was so adamant that he hadn't been hypnotized. And that's how Sirhan was, because his defense team actually hypnotized him, trying to get him to remember. And he insisted he had not been hypnotized, even when they had all just seen it. In fact, at one point, one of the hypnotists made him climb the bars of his prison cell like a monkey. And it was supposed to be on a cue. When he like touched a little handkerchief in his pocket, that was the trigger sign. And sure enough, he touched the pocket. Sirhan started climbing the bars of his cell, and Robert Blair Kaiser, witnessed the whole exchange. He's like, oh my gosh, he really, he responded immediately to hypnosis. Now, not everybody does. The population is kind of divided into fifths. 1/5 of the people can never be hypnotized. And then the next 3/5 can be hypnotized to a varying degree, but 1/5 can be so completely hypnotized, you can make them do pretty much anything you want. Now, we're always told, if you go to these shows, it's like a mantra, you'll hear it over and over: no one can be hypnotized to do something against their will. That's true, but everyone can be fooled if they are that hypnotizable into believing something is happening that is not. All right. And here's a good example of that. Let's say I wanted you to kill your mother, and I got you in hypnosis. I told you to kill your mother. You wouldn't do it. Even under a deep hypnosis, you would not do it, most likely. But if I told you in this deep hypnotic state, your mother has been kidnapped and a substitute has been put in her place, and they have done up her makeup and her clothing, and they've even taught her to cry just like your mother. She will sound and act and smell just like your mother, but she is not your mother. And in fact, she's going to kill your mother if you don't kill her first. If you were deeply hypnotized and you heard that scenario, you might actually kill your mother thinking you were saving your mother. So you see how easy it is to twist somebody's mind under hypnosis. And in Sirhan's case, there was a hypnotist. Well, first of all, his own defense team hypnotized him. But here's what they did. They're like, Sirhan, all right, reach for your gun, Sirhan. Do you remember that? Sirhan, Robert Kennedy is coming towards you. Pull out your gun and shoot at him. Do you remember that? they're like trying to program a memory into him. They're not just asking open-ended questions. So many, many years later, Bill Pepper, who was at that time Sirhan's attorney, hired one of the foremost hypnosis experts in the country, Dr. Dan Brown. He was written like 4 textbooks on the subject. I think he taught at Harvard, if not Harvard, one of the Ivy League schools. Um, and he's testified at numerous trials, and he got 60 hours over a 2-year period with Sirhan. And he just asked him very open-ended questions. And so in under his hypnosis, he took Sirhan back through the pantry. He's like, what do you see? What do you hear? And Sirhan remembered meeting this girl in a polka dot dress, that she was super attractive and sexy. He was hoping he'd get lucky with her. He followed her around like a puppy dog. He distinctly remembered her pouring coffee from an urn, or he poured coffee for her from an urn, and she wanted lots of cream, lots of sugar. And then that's the last thing he remembered outside his hypnosis. But under hypnosis, he remembered her taking him to the pantry and her putting him on the tray stand. That there was a tray stacker that was kind of at the back of the room, and if you put your feet up on the lower bars, you would be at an elevated position so you could see over everybody's heads, so they could see when Robert Kennedy entered the room, right? And the girl was behind Sirhan, and another witness in the pantry said it looked like she was holding him on there. So she was like keeping him in one place where she could see past him to where Robert Kennedy came in. And then Sirhan remembered her looking up to the right. And I knew, because I've been in that room in my mind for so long. I'm like, she's looking up at the shooter on the table and saying, "Do you see him yet?" They're giving each other signals. Here he comes. And then she moved Sirhan to the middle of the room. He said, and then she gave me like a weird pinch, and suddenly I was back at the target range. He had spent the earlier part of the day at a target range outside of Pasadena, shooting at targets with a gun. It was something he enjoyed doing. He'd been in ROTC in college, and it was just a fun thing. It wasn't about shooting people. It was just target practice. And so in his mind, in hypnosis in the pantry, he was looking at targets. That's what he was seeing. He wasn't firing at Robert Kennedy. He wasn't trying to kill Robert Kennedy. He was literally firing at targets. And I would not have believed that if I hadn't gone to this other hypnosis show where I saw this woman who, and I talked to her for like 20 minutes before the show started. I didn't know she was going to be in the show. We just happened to be sitting next to each other, or chatting just normally and having fun. And then she volunteered to be part of it. And it turned out she was highly hypnotizable. So she was chosen to be, one of the people that wasn't sent back to their seats. And on stage, the hypnotist gave her like a Monopoly $100 bill and told her it was a $35,000 check. And she, danced around and was excited and woo-hoo-hoo and, well, just what you'd expect. But then after the show was over, I didn't see her immediately, and I ran off to talk to the hypnotist, because I wanted to ask him about Sirhan. And as soon as I mentioned Sirhan, he got really uncomfortable and left the area as fast as he could. And he was a young guy, so he couldn't possibly have been involved. He wouldn't have even been born at that. But evidently, it's a subject that's very sensitive to hypnotists, because maybe they understand it better than we do. But anyway, after he left, then I was looking around, and there was this woman who had just been on stage, and she looked very distressed. And I'm like, "Are you okay? What happened? Did you lose your family?" And she goes, "No, I have to give this back." And it was just the play money. I'm like, "Oh, it's just play money. I don't think he cares." And she goes, "No, it's a $35,000 check." And she was still in it. She was still hypnotized. And if we weren't talking, there's no way in the world you would assume she was hypnotized. She looked as normal as any person, just a little distressed, somebody had with something on her mind. But as I talked to her, I'm like, "Can I touch that with you? Can we look at this together?" And I said, "Do you see this number circled here in the upper right?" And she said, "No, it's a $35,000 check, and I have to give it back." And it gave me chills, and it kind of broke my heart, because for all I know, she went home and wrote him a $35,000 check and mailed it off. You know what I mean? It's like she was so convinced that she owed him that money. It was frightening. But it also showed me that even when other people are telling you, you try and be in reality here, you see what you're programmed to see. And if Sirhan was programmed to see targets and fire at them, that's what he was doing. That's why he was firing straight ahead. And
Mm.
of course, he was captured after his second shot, and he almost came out of hypnosis because he was almost choked to death. And so that brought him like right to the level of consciousness because he remembers a moment where he felt like he was being choked. And then there's like no other conscious memory until well after he'd been in prison for a while. Took a long time for that to wear off. And again, that's what the hypnotist told me at one of the first shows I saw. Give them 24 hours. It's going to take a while. And then in the course of my research, I read about a case I'd never heard about or read in anybody else's books. It happened in Serbia, Yugoslavia, back in like the 1920s. And it was a cop volunteered to go up on stage in a hypnosis act. And the the hypnotist basically handed him a block of wood and told him, shoot up the audience like they're criminals. And so he did, boom, 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 boom. Of course, it's just a block of wood. But frustrated that he hadn't been able to actually shoot up the audience, he then pulled out his real gun and started shooting into the audience. And he actually killed somebody and wounded several others. This is how powerful hypnosis is. People don't understand. This is a super serious, absolutely mind control tool for those people who are highly hypnotizable. And again, it's not everybody. And people who poo poo it are usually the ones who have never been hypnotized or don't think they've been hypnotized. Because, like I said, that guy who was hypnotized in the show and proposed to his girl was like, I wasn't hypnotized. I didn't do that. What are you talking about?
But that's something that's not discussed in this case.
No.
So
we're told it's harmless, that you can't be made to do something against your will, but you can if you're that highly hypnotizable.
Why do you touched upon this when we were trying to tape this earlier this week, but I wanted to find out from you why you think the Kennedy family have said, I don't want to talk about it.
At one point, somebody who claimed to be a friend of the family, who may or may not have been, it could have all just been a lie, but it rang true, said that Ted Kennedy at one point gathered the family and said, we're not going to talk about this anymore, because Bobby had been looking into JFK's death when he was killed. In fact, he'd gone to Mexico City and tried to retrace Oswald's steps there and, see if he could figure out what had happened. And that, I think, made the CIA very nervous. And again, it goes back to his time in the Senate where he was an investigator and a very, very skilled investigator. The CIA didn't want him anywhere near the White House because they had killed JFK and they didn't want Bobby discovering it. So it makes sense that they would then take out Bobby before he became president, so it would be less suspicious. And it was easy to blame it on a young Palestinian, although in a way that's a tip-off too, because this was really, in fact, years later, somebody wrote a book that he was the first Palestinian terrorist. Well, he wasn't a terrorist, and he was a Palestinian Christian. He wasn't even a Muslim, like, some of the people have tried to say. And then he didn't kill him. But it's like only the CIA was at that point as obsessed with the Israel-Palestine conflict. That wasn't something like the mob knew about or cared about. The mob wouldn't have framed a Palestinian. The CIA would totally have framed a Palestinian, to benefit Israel and to give them some, visibility in America, to the anti-Palestinian cause. It was highly scripted, and Sirhan apparently had been being hypnotized for probably a year and a half before that point. So they didn't choose him just for this case and then work on him for that, because Bobby wasn't even running at the time. Sirhan basically had a fall from a horse and ended up going to a doctor for what the doctor said were only minor scrapes and bruises. But he went 13 times in 12 months to a doctor. Yeah, it's like, I've had minor scrapes and bruises. I've never gone I've even had surgery. I've never gone to the doctor for, 13 times in 12 months. I think that was the excuse to get him in for programming. And it's funny because one of the fathers of modern hypnotists is George Estabrooks, and he wrote that hospitals are a great place to spot people because when they're under like anesthesia or whatever, you can tell immediately like who's highly hypnotizable and who isn't by the way they respond to certain cues. And Sirhan was, like I said, off the charts hypnotizable. Any hypnotist who's ever seen him is like, wow, they could put him under just like that. Even though he, like I said, to this day has no memory of ever being hypnotized by anyone. One time they did kind of a classic trick where they'd hypnotize him and they'd put like a little safety pin in his hand, so sticking out to prove that he had been hypnotized, because when they brought him out, and then he'd see this pin sticking his hand with no memory of it having gone in. And that's a way to prove to people that they've been hypnotized.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that horrible?
I mean, but all of this sounds so horrible, Lisa Pease.
It's all
I mean,
horrible.
because now, who, before I even get back into the mechanics of the assassination, who represented Sirhan Sirhan?
Well, like I said, originally it was Grant Cooper and Emil Berman and another guy, I can't even think of his name right now, who had an alias, an old mob lawyer. But they weren't really representing Sirhan. Their job was to close the case out and get him the death penalty. They claimed they were trying to save his life, but the actions in court basically said the opposite. So, and then he had a series of lawyers. At least one of them had, CI ties that, according to Lynn Mangan, who had a reason to know. And then, of course, Bill Pepper seemed to be the only one who took it seriously. It's been shocking. And then since then, he's had lawyers that are just trying to get him paroled. And when you're trying to get somebody paroled, you can't argue that he was set up in the crime in the first place and that he was just a pawn in a bigger game, because no one cares. It's like parole hearings are purely to get people released. And the first thing the parole board wants to hear is a confession. So Sirhan is constantly confessing to this crime that he couldn't possibly have committed, that he knows he couldn't have committed, but there's no other way to get paroled if you don't take responsibility for the crime you were sentenced for. And so it's this horrible catch-22 that he's in. And his latest parole attorney did listen to my book, on Books on Tape. And I hope that makes her want to help him more, but she's retiring basically. And I wish sometimes I'd become an attorney, because I think I would have fought for Sirhan until he got released. This is the best I can do, not being a lawyer. And I've spent like 30 years on this case at this point. And somebody asked me at a book signing in Pasadena, can you let it go now? Now that you've written this book, can you let the case go? And I had to think about that, because I would like to. I would like to, fill my life with happy thoughts and meadows and fawns and dolphins and unicorns, but until Sirhan is free, I have to keep living this case too. It's like I feel I'm as imprisoned by this history now in my own way, not as him. I can't possibly compare what's happening to him with what's happening to me. I hope people don't think I'm trying to say that, but it's a lock on my life. I can't stop talking about it because this history really matters. And here's what I really want to get to, and that's that this case is a template that has been used again and again since, and probably been used before, and we just don't know it. But for example, there was a plot in Los Angeles to kill Jimmy Carter, and it was exposed because a guy started firing blanks and drawing the attention, or he wasn't firing blanks, but he pulled out, a gun and was fingering it and caught the attention of the Secret Service. And, he told them, well, he basically confessed the whole plot, because he was clearly not hypnotized in this case. But he's like, my role was to, fire blanks to pull focus so that these other guys could shoot him from a high building. And this is what we need to understand, that it is all about misdirection and distraction. So when we get to the Trump shooting, I couldn't help but wonder if there was another sniper somewhere and it was blamed on this young kid and he was shot. But was he actually the real sniper? Because the angle's just a little weird, especially the way Trump turned his head at the last minute. And if somebody was in the trees right next to that building, that would have been a much straighter shot to nick his ear just the way it was nicked. and, kind of expertly nicked without killing him. And
Mm.
again, maybe things happen just exactly the way we saw. But you don't know. And you don't know if that kid was programmed. In fact, he had no ID on him and no motive, no history of speaking out against Trump. He had some Republican stuff in his background and some Democratic stuff in his background, but he was a young kid. He wasn't particularly ideological. There was really no motive. And in one of the chief detectives wrote a book after the Sirhan case called Special Unit Senator. And in there, he said that Sirhan's lack of ID bothered him because he said, in our experience, when somebody doesn't have ID on them, it's to give their co-conspirators a chance to get away. So he actually said that about the Sirhan case, but I thought of that in the Trump case too. So we don't know. And if we don't ask all the questions, did they find the bullet? Did they match it to that kid's gun? Did they prove it? Did they not bother because Trump lived? So why go in all that trouble? But I feel like we should know what happened. When the FBI looked into the bullets in the JFK assassination, they found they came from an order from the 50s that had been ordered by the Marine Corps for weapons the Marine Corps never owned. And the FBI agent openly speculated it looked like they were ordered by the CIA using the Marines as cover. And that was in the JFK case. So it's like all the little details, they kind of do matter.
Mhm.
What doesn't matter is who was the girl in the polka dot dress. I can't tell you, every year somebody has come to me and said, oh, I found the girl in the polka dot dress. And I listened to them for a couple of hours. And by the end of usually after the end of the first 5 minutes, I know it's not her, but I always want to give them a chance. But I've stopped listening to people because it's like, one, they never have the right girl, and two, it doesn't matter. What matters is that we never got a real investigation of this case. What matters is the LAPD knew they were lying to the media. The media knew they were lying to us, and have kept lying about this case. And then it becomes canon, and no one dares go against it now, this many years
Mhm.
later, because they don't want to be called a crazy conspiracy theorist, even though it's the truth. Not all conspiracies are theories. Some of them are real. you know.
Yeah. But see, and that is my question. I mean, because now you've been able to, now Robert Kennedy Jr. has named some names. He said someone held my father. Someone else gave him the kill shot at his ear.
Yep.
And you don't have to go far to look. I mean, there's a photograph of him having just been shot. He's bleeding from behind. Why are we not seeing this?
And his extended arm is pointing at a
Yeah.
clip-on tie that he evidently pulled off the
Yes.
struggle. And that clip-on tie belonged to that CIA guy, Thane Caesar, that I mentioned, that was working for Robert Mayhew and the Howard Hughes organization. Hughes, by the way, was incapacitated pretty much by the time Mayhew got a hold of him, and the CIA siphoned his money off. They just ripped him off blind and used his money for operations. And yeah, there's a whole other movie besides Aviator to be
Oh
told
my
about
God.
Howard Hughes and the way the CIA basically took over his empire. Yeah.
But that's amazing. I mean, with this, I mean? Why do you think it's important that we know what happened?
I think I think history is like a medical chart. And
Mhm.
imagine being treated by a doctor who's looking at somebody else's chart and not your chart. And
Oh,
he's telling you you have cancer when in fact you have diabetes. And they require totally different treatments. I think because we are given this false history, we keep reaching for false fixes to what we perceive the problem to be because we're not seeing the problem clearly. I mean, to me, Trump is part of the deep state. Hello. How did he get this far? It's like if people don't understand history, they can't see it when it's repeating in front of their eyes and they can't adjust to it correctly. And which is, again, very much in the CIA's interest to keep giving us a false history so that people never really do know what's going on. But in the process, they're also destroying the very country that they're sworn to protect. And I wish they would understand that every lie they tell ends up damaging this country to the point where, I mean, I feel like our country's been hanging from a thread from about the year 2000, and pretty soon it's just going to break, and it could happen in the next 4 years. There was martial law declared in South Korea. I don't know if you saw that in the news today.
Absolutely.
And my first thought was that could happen here. I could just see
But
Trump
and
coming up with a reason to declare martial law,
well,
and boom.
I,
And I'm
honestly, I don't. Honestly, I could see it happening from
with
anybody.
Biden or any, yeah, exactly, exactly. It
Because
could happen with anyone.
well, I
Yes.
mean, I keep going back, pivoting back to that point because no matter what, no matter who, I can't find out who killed JFK, RFK, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. I mean,
Hmm.
no matter who, no matter what, it was my party that said we're not going to have any
Yeah.
problem. So what about the 14 million dollars? Well, what about them?
Hmm.
We're going to get George Clooney to write an op-ed piece in the New York Times. That's going to be it. It's a wrap.
Yeah.
When I'm listening, I watch the Washington Journal on C-SPAN.
Hmm.
At some
I
point,
like that show.
I love it. And then when they
Yeah.
open up the phone lines and listening to people want to believe in our government, but they do not believe it. And when you
Yeah.
have something like, no, not something like, when you have this murder that happened right before our very eyes.
Hmm.
Because I can tell you right now, I'd want to know, okay, who, they were not supposed to walk through the kitchen. Who directed him to the kitchen?
Hmm.
Who held him in place?
Hmm.
And I mean, that's just some of the background scenery.
Yeah.
The foreground, I mean, well, no, that's the foreground scenery. The background is, why did the powers that be not want Robert Kennedy to become president, Lisa?
Yeah. Well, they very much feared a Kennedy dynasty. That was talked about at the time. They worried that after JFK would come Bobby and then Teddy. They saw this whole 30-year reign of the Kennedy family, and it terrified people on the right who didn't want Democrats in power for that long. And so then when JFK was taken out, Bobby was obviously the heir to that, and they didn't want him getting in there either. Although, like I said, there's such strong evidence that the CIA killed JFK and then killed Bobby to help cover that up, basically. And that's so horrific. But there's so much evidence there. Again, I could spend the rest of my life listing facts for people, because I've spent 30 years researching both those assassinations and the
Mhm.
history of the world at that point in time. And and when I say the CIA, you could also, switch that with the deep state or the establishment, because they were all the same thing at that point in time. And the CIA was kind of the elite of the elite. So, there were like the business circles and the hobnob, but it was the like head bankers and head lawyers who were joining the OSS, who became part of the CIA, who enlisted their other establishment buddies. The CIA was the establishment. They weren't answering to the establishment. They were the establishment. And this is what I'd like people to understand. There's Alan Dulles didn't answer to anybody. He didn't answer to FDR. He didn't answer to Eisenhower. And he definitely didn't answer to Kennedy. But only Kennedy had the guts to fire him for that. And then look what
Mm.
happened. You fire the Godfather, basically, things happen. And Alan Dulles was, if anything, the godfather of the CIA.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, what do you want to see happen? I mean,
I don't think change is possible without much greater awareness and discernment, because there are a lot of people who just believe it was a conspiracy, but then they believe like crazy conspiracies, like that Bobby killed Marilyn. They don't know how to discern fact from fiction. Because, by the way, Bobby Kennedy was not anywhere near Marilyn when she was dead. He was photographed with his family in Gilroy that night, the next morning, going to church. His schedule had him accounted for it every minute. When you're in politics, and this, there's that scheduler. You don't get to just disappear for 6 hours and no one knows where you are. That just doesn't happen. But people believe this because they saw it in some YouTube video, and they don't think critically. So it's like, I don't just want people to say, okay, this was a conspiracy. I want them to really think critically. What are the facts that prove this is a conspiracy? What should I look for the next time there's something that I suspect is a conspiracy so I can investigate it properly. I've even thought of like setting up a course in this because most people do it very badly. Most people aren't very good researchers, and it takes hard work to just to determine fact from fiction. You can't, just because it's in a document doesn't mean it's true. Just because only one person said it doesn't mean it's false. You have to look at how it fits in the bigger picture, the pieces of evidence. It is like a puzzle, and if you get the answer right, all the pieces fit without distortion. If
Mm.
pieces are being jammed in there that don't quite fit, you don't have the solution correct.
I'm trying. Hmm. As we peel back this onion, do you think,
Hmm.
because it's an onion and it'll make you cry?
Yeah.
You know,
That's good.
oh yeah, I
I'm
mean,
gonna steal that, Santita.
yeah. I mean, why is if we found out that our that these agencies were involved, directed, killed him, what do you think would be the fallout of that?
Now, what I think will be the fallout, I think is very different from what the CIA thinks will be the fallout. I think the reason the secrets are kept is the CIA is worried their agency would be disbanded, that there would be mobs in the streets demanding justice. Now, my opinion is that people would go, "Oh, so that's what happened," and go about their business, and nothing would really change. And that would be the saddest thing of all, in a way. But I don't think people are going to call for the overthrow of the CIA. I do think if the media started telling us bit by bit the truth about what really happened, the media could regain credibility. And if the government officials would come out and speak only the truth about this and not go off on wild conspiracy theories, like Trump accused one of his opponents of being responsible for JFK's assassination without really any good evidence of that. It's like you can't do it wildly, but if they were to be factual about 9/11 and say, look, we know it wasn't the people that we originally said. We know we had no weapons of mass destruction. We were worried about getting Iraq's oil. There could be some trust rebuilt. Um, I think that's what is most needed is we need to evolve. We need to demand truth, and not just from elected officials, from ourselves, from our friends, from our associates, and not let people get away with lazy thinking, just kind of go with the flow and, oh, that was a conspiracy, but I don't need to know what really happened. No, I think you do need to know what really happened, and you don't need to know every detail, but you need to know kind of accurately what happened, and it can't just be a belief. And then the media must report it, or this country cannot survive. I mean, I don't give us another 40 years. I honestly don't. I think we'll be in a civil war if we don't start getting some massive doses of truth from the media.
I'm trying to find out now. I'm pausing because I'm trying to see if we can ever get to it. I mean, what
What would it
just
take?
what would it take, and what do we know thus far for sure? What do we know for sure? Because what I
Well,
want
for
to
sure,
do.
we know that Sirhan didn't do it and that he should
Okay,
be freed.
no,
That
no, that's
whatever
number
role
one.
he played, he didn't, he it wasn't cognizant of it. He wasn't a willing participant. There is a principle of mens rea. You have to prove malicious intent.
Mhm.
There is no evidence of malicious intent. I shouldn't say there's no, because there's some that was planted along the way and built into his story that the CIA was building, the legend created. But there are things said about him at the trial that were untrue. A garbage man claimed he had this conversation where Sirhan said he killed Kennedy. Turned out the garbage man had been pressured by the FBI, and was, in jail himself and needed an out. And so he did whatever he was told. And, that's sadly the way the world works. So, but I honestly think if I feel like books like mine, and I'm not saying this to promote my book, but I just think books like this changed lives and cracked minds open and helped them see the world in a more true way and question events sooner, because we can't have a 20-year period. By then, people's memories are changing. And,
Hmm.
maybe it was you who I had a conversation with. Oh no, it was somebody else, but she was saying memory is reconstructed each time. It's not like it's stored and you just access it
Hmm.
like a file on your computer, but it's like rebuilt each time. So each time it's rebuilt, it's a little different than before. And so obviously, the further you get from something in time, the less credible somebody's memory is of the event, because they've now embellished or added things that weren't there originally. But I think it's important for us to understand that our country, we had a coup in 1963,
Hmm.
and the other assassinations were to bolster that coup and keep us on the path to perpetual war, which is what we're on now. And we're supporting the genocide in Gaza. We're supporting, the war in Ukraine, that even the Ukrainians are like, we're ready to give Russia some of our land just to make the war end. And the US is like, no, no, we want you to keep fighting. It's
Well,
like, it's so unfair. We're
well,
the
I mean,
bad guys. I want people to understand the US are the bad guys on the world scene.
I think we're beginning to see that domestically. I
Yes.
mean, and I've already been in a particular place just given, hey, I met Fred Hampton. So, I mean, going to school that
Mhm.
morning and looking at the television set, which was as tall as I was at the time.
Mm.
And wait a minute, wasn't he just at our breadbasket meeting last week?
Oh.
Daddy's, what happened? And it happened overnight. So, I mean, our apartment was full. Someone was going to take me to school, and it had just happened overnight.
Hmm.
So people, my father rolled deep in those days, and so a lot of people were at the place. There were the place. It was crowded,
Yeah.
and and a lot of people who worked for Dr. King died mysteriously in the immediate aftermath of his death.
Hmm.
Um, I'm just, I feel like this is a movie. I have to honestly tell you, it's hard. It's hard for me personally because
Yeah, you live so close to it all.
well, and you know what, my heart just breaks for the family,
Yes.
um because for them not to say anything, I said, they're trying to stay alive now.
Yeah.
And that was my read on it always. And
And
I
I'd like to think that's the case, although I've come to know in various ways some of the other members of the Kennedy
Mhm.
family, through associates, and a lot of them have fallen for the lie just like the general public have. They're not special in that regard. Some of them are just easily convinced too, or just want to be seen as going with the crowd, not even out of fear of life, but more out of fear of being called a conspiracy theorist or a kook. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's frustrating, and it's so inspiring to see Malcolm X's children just say,
Oh,
"Look, we know you're responsible. We want to know what happened. We're suing for justice." And I wish to God that the Kennedy family could find it within them to do that, but they can't if they think the case is already solved. If they think Oswald did it, if they think Sirhan did it, why would they sue anyone? So
well,
and the other thing is Bobby wrote about this in his book American Values, Bobby Jr.
mhm.
Um, in his book American Values, he talks about how the CIA kind of infiltrated his whole family. It's
Ah,
like they were coming in and out of the house, they were playing with the kids. They'd be, a CIA woman married his son-in-law. I don't think that's a coincidence. And then she ended up running his campaign into the
mhm.
ground. These people, they trust people I would never in a million years trust. And I don't know if it's
No, but
naivety or
say that.
fear or just genuine belief.
No, but say that because they insinuate themselves into your family,
Yeah, yeah.
and I
And
think
there
what people need
I
to
heard
understand.
Whitney Webb. I'm sure you know Whitney Webb, who wrote about Edward
Absolutely.
Epstein.
I
Yeah, she made a comment that Ghislaine Maxwell was at one point targeting the Kennedy family and trying to marry
to
into it.
marry
And
in.
I
Right.
and then I thought, and Amaryllis Fox did.
Yeah.
Was she the follow-up when Ghislaine failed? I don't know. Ghislaine, however you pronounce her name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, but these are the things I think. I'm listening in the mornings to these people when C-SPAN opens up the phone lines on Washington Journal, and people this horse is out the barn,
Mhm.
and
Yeah, people are
but
more aware than the media lets
don't you
on.
think?
Yes, absolutely.
And I mean, just to be as we begin to wrap things up, and this, I don't mean wrap things up forever. I mean just
No, no.
hey,
If only we
no,
could.
because the only reason I say that, Lisa Peace, is because we're gonna have to take a lot of turns, a lot of bites at this apple because it's real
Mhm.
big. There's a lot, and many of us are still skeptical. Many of us, because we throw out the term conspiracy theorist like it's nothing. And
Right.
do you not know where that term comes from? And I have to tell you, and I'll be frank with you, it's very insulting to me
Yes, yes.
because I'm like, wait a minute, that's
It's used derogatorily to shut down any discussion of actual conspiracies,
yeah,
and so I call myself a conspiracy realist because people aren't programmed for that, and
yeah.
it opens their mind a little bit. So, but they're very programmed against conspiracy theory.
Well, just in a nutshell, boy,
In a nutshell. Yeah. The
what do
forces of evil
what
killed the forces of good so they could keep perpetuating evil. That's the the
that's
the
pretty.
most condensed nutshell I could. It's the selfish, greedy America gets to dominate the world and rip off every other country on the planet mindset that killed the let's live together cooperatively mindset. And that's, to me, that's the bottom line war we're facing.
Yeah,
Either we're in it for ourselves or we're in it to elevate all of us. And I'm on the side of let's elevate all of us. But there are, a whole bunch of people who are like, whatever I can get for me. And, some of that will trickle down to other people and they can have, whatever I'm my leftovers are.
yeah,
That's not me. That was
yeah.
not the Kennedys. That was not King. That was not, Medgar Evers. It is people trying to do good versus people trying to do for themselves. And bottom line, I originally was going to write a book on both assassinations and call it Collision Course to describe exactly that, where one faction, the CIA, the establishment, basically wanted the US to dominate the world, and the other faction, the Kennedy, family, wanted to find a way to seek cooperation and, cohabitation with the rest of the world, where we traded not just guns and didn't make you a client state, but treated you as an equal partner, even when you're a tiny country. We didn't just run all over you because we could. Whereas to Ellen Dulles, it's like, my God, they have gold, we have money, we should go get their gold. We should dig a hole in Indonesia and, rip off that, the largest gold mine in the world now. One of them is in Indonesia, where
Mhm.
it was kept secret for years until the CIA was able to overthrow the leaders and get the guy they wanted in place. And then they could open their gold mine and rip off the entire nation of Indonesia. And they did it and they got away with it because people don't know and people didn't read. And that's the side story I wrote about it. One time, Freeport McMoran is the company running the gold mine now. It used to be called Freeport Sulfur. Half its board members are like Rockefeller baby kids,
Yeah,
um, Rockefeller client people who worked with them, that faction. It's like the Elon Musks of today who feel because they're rich, they must be smarter than everybody else and therefore they deserve more. And they're not rich because they're smarter. They're rich because they inherited it.
yeah. Oh yeah.
So,
So I
yeah. In
mean,
fact, Elon Musk has run most of his businesses into the ground.
and no one talks about that part.
Yeah. Yeah. And
When
Trump too, for that matter. Yeah. Yeah.
that those parts.
Yeah. Mhm.
Before we go, what there, we discussed, kind of glossed over it, but I did get the book The Last President when they were talking
Oh,
about
good.
John Kennedy.
Good.
And I've had it for some time, but I had to buy another one because I've got hundreds of books here since I've
I've
moved.
done that. I can't find one, so I buy another
I just
copy of
buy
it.
another, and if I get it, then I give it to one of my brothers because we read like that.
Good.
What have we What have we lost and what can we gain? What did we lose as we
Ooh,
lost these great reformers?
I think
And
we
what
lost the
can we gain?
ability to stand up for what's right. I think the entire Democratic Party, I mean, the party was like beheaded in the 50s, I mean in the 60s.
Yeah.
That's the way I describe it. It's like you lost the top 5 leaders of the in the Democratic or on the left, because Martin Luther
Hmm.
King didn't consider himself a Democrat. He
Hmm.
didn't trust the Democrats, and I understand that more now than I did at the time.
Too. Me too. Me too.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've come to, I call myself a Democrat because I've been one lifelong, but I am so pissed at the Democrats right now. I can hardly,
Well,
speak about
I'm
them anymore.
an
Yeah.
independent Democrat. I come from Chicago. Tyranny is Democrats' first name. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, coming up under Richard Daley, the
Mm.
father, no.
Mhm.
I mean, and he is still the iconic big city mayor.
Yeah.
Chicago's oriented by the block. It's literally by the block. Precinct
Yeah.
captains. I mean, that's a big deal still today here. My question is, you know, what do we have to gain from finding out the truth about
Mhm.
Robert Kennedy's assassination? What do we have to gain?
I think what we have to gain uh, is more about learning who these people were and what they stood for so that we understand how to make people like that again.
Mm-hmm.
The Kennedys were a very well-read family. They didn't sit around and watch TV, they read books, and John Kennedy would go on a trip and read a book a day. I mean, it's like they were intellectuals.
Mm-hmm.
They they were also Catholic. They felt they owed, that you take care of the poor and the needy. That's a Catholic value.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying we all should become Catholic by any means, but I think we need to understand what were the core values and how do we build that again? And then how do we give people the courage to stand up and fight, knowing they too may lose their lives? But I feel like if enough, I also feel, and I've always felt this, which is again the reason I've spent 30 years on this. I feel if we hold the perpetrators responsible, even if we don't know their exact names, but if we speak honestly about what we do know and what happened and that it was a conspiracy, that it makes it harder for that to happen in the future. If we expose the conspiracies of JFK and RFK and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and the mechanisms behind them, and honestly, the intelligence agencies were involved in all of those cases, all of them. Um, I think it makes it harder for them to do it the next time, and therefore it makes it easier for a good person to rise again. Does that make sense?
That
That's
absolutely makes sense because
that's what drives me.
that
Yeah.
gives me hope, and
Yes.
and that really is it because I see a lot of people, as we close, a lot of people are feeling hopeless. I mean, there was just
Mhm.
talking to my mother, who's a brilliant political strategist. She
Mm.
said, and my father says the smartest person I know is my wife.
Aw.
No, no, because she's always been ahead of him politically. My
Mhm.
mother's the daughter of migrant workers from South Florida.
Oh,
So
wow.
my grandmother, though born in the United States, spent a lot of time in the Caribbean and in South and Central America
Mhm.
because as a little girl she was born into poverty, and
Oh.
you hopped on the boat and you worked daily or seasonally. So the first time I went to Havana, she was able to describe. She said, "Well, when you get into Havana, you'll be on. Go to this street, and let me tell you, walk down this street 3 blocks, make a left. This is a shortcut into the Hotel Havana." I said, "Oh, when I did that, I said, wow, Grandma, took an hour plus change to get a call through because at that time, this was in the late 70s. You
Uh-huh.
get, when you called from Cuba, they had to route the call through the Soviet Union and through all these other places because of the embargo. And then, because you had to put in an order for a call, which was
Yeah.
crazy.
Wow.
But I guess at the end of the day, I think that I think that Americans are more ready to hear. And I think we'd be more relieved to hear the
Mm.
truths about what happened. And I think some entities would not survive.
Hmm.
I think what would survive would be the American
Change.
people.
Yes, yes. What would survive would be the vision of
The,
America that
the,
we grew up
the idea, the ideal, and that's what I'm still hopeful for that.
good. Yeah, I
I'm
don't
still
wanna
hopeful.
take people's hope away, and because I don't feel it's hopeless, I feel it's empowering to know the truth, and it should embolden people. Because again, the more of us who know this, the harder it is to kill the next person because we know what to look for. We're gonna go after those records much sooner. We're gonna hold those people accountable and really throw them in jail, and but but
Yeah.
it takes effort. It takes not just sitting
Mhm.
home and watching Netflix for the rest of your life, you
Well,
know?
that's why this is not as easy, and that's why I'm saying I think the this presidency is more this upcoming presidency is more complex because the times are calling for something else.
Yes.
Um,
We're in for massive change no matter what, and
no,
some of
no,
that'll be good,
some of it's going
some
to be
of it
good.
will be bad.
Yeah, I mean, but honestly, I think that was going to happen either way
Yeah,
because change is like that,
yeah.
and even if Vice President Harris had gotten in, the while I supported her, there were many. She was going to be president of the people who did not support her, and they
Mhm.
were going to be meeting her in the office that day because they run the country.
Right.
That is something. That is why when they say, "Oh, Trump is moving all these people," he's been there before, so he knows the deal.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
and the more I read about the things that happened, the underreported stories, I said, "Whoa, he got so much pushback on so much that I have to say on NAFTA, he had the papers drawn up to end it.
Oh, wow,
His
wow.
staff member was physically blocked from giving it to him.
Oh
He
my
saw,
gosh.
oh, he saw. I mean, and I read
Wow.
everything because I know when we lived in the bubble, I said this is not. After '88, we were done. Lisa Pease. We
Oh,
told,
yeah.
we told our father. We said this hey, because people who were in it told
Mhm.
us you don't belong here. You all are people of the church.
Oh,
And
no.
no, and live no, and living with them. I mean, I can just say the Secret Service, they thought we were a very different kind of family. 'Cause they said, number one, you are a family.
Yeah.
So, and that for them, they said was refreshing. And each time we closed out our campaigns, they cried
Oh,
because
oh.
we'd all become quite close.
Mhm.
And because when you live with the people who were one or two who were hostile, they were rooted out. But these people got a chance to see, they had heard all of these awful things about Reverend, and then they met us and they saw our people, the people who he was,
Yes.
and I'm hopeful for that again. And I think,
Yeah.
I mean, because that was
And the internet really helps, doesn't it? You're able to speak now directly to people without having to go through a media filter. I'm able to talk about what really happened. This has never been possible before. And
well,
I
they put me off
do,
a
that
radio
gives
station,
me hope too.
and
Yeah.
they put me off of radio stations, but I keep on going. The Lord keeps
Yeah.
opening portals for me to get on other platforms. And I'm moving into the podcast space, and I want to talk with you about that because I think that as we close, we have got to get the word out because people are hungry for it. I
They
really,
are.
I think that the work
I
that
even
you're
had a
doing,
major network producer talk to me about this case, and I don't want to say which network, but
yeah, yeah.
one of the famous hosts that people watch every week is very interested in this case, but they don't know how to tell it in the format of their show because those shows, the morning shows, they don't cover history. And they know they'd be opening this whole can of worms and that the government would be coming down on them with a ton of bricks, but if they felt there was a way to tell the story bit by bit, they wanna do it,
Well,
which is interesting.
they're looking for a
Yeah.
way. If you could wait with me
Yeah.
here, Lisa Pease, everybody, a lie too big to fail. This is the real history of the assassination of Robert Kennedy Sr. You need to read this book. Put it under your Christmas tree. AM 950 Radio, The Santita Jackson Show. I love you, everybody. God bless you and good night. But I'm going to continue to talk to her for just a couple more minutes. I don't want to wear Lisa P's out. I want her to come back. But I did want you to address this. Solomon Harris has had a lot to ask you. And we're
Okay.
ended the show, but I'm still recording so that they can hear you.
Sure.
He
Sure.
said, why didn't Ted Kennedy try to release his brother's information?
Try to release what part of his brother's
I think
information? I mean,
why didn't he pursue?
oh,
Uh,
I think Teddy was worried. Well, first of all, when JFK died, he left 2 children, right? Carolyn and John Jr., and they kind of got absorbed into Bobby's family a little bit. Bobby had 13 kids by the time he had 12 kids when he died, and a 13th one came after he died because Ethel was pregnant at the time.
Yeah.
And so now you're talking 15 kids that had to go to Ted for care, you know what I mean, as the only male figure. And so I think he didn't want to risk losing himself, and there'd be like no Kennedy men left to raise all these kids. So I think, I also think he didn't have the stomach for it. He wanted his own career in politics, and he didn't want to have to put his life on the line to do it.
I think he was under an enormous amount of pressure because I do remember in the 80s.
Yeah, he almost ran, right, against Carter. Well, he did run.
He did run
Carter
against
for
Carter,
the nomination. Yeah,
but I think in the mid to late 80s, he was really struggling, and people close to him were very. I know my father was very worried about him. They were worried about his health, and so when he married his wife, his widow, she was known as someone who really stabilized him. I don't think we really understand all that they have seen and all that they cannot say.
That's a good point.
Even today. Because the same forces that killed their loved ones are still very much alive, and they're blocking the information.
Yeah.
I mean there is evidence that the Zapruder film has been manipulated.
Yes.
And when you hear people talk about this now, it's very clear. They're covered a lot of you. They're different now. More and more people are talking about different groups that had an interest in seeing John F. Kennedy killed.
Yeah. Well, and again, everybody on the planet practically had a motive to kill him, but but most of them didn't have the means to cover it up for 60 years. It's like literally only the CIA and the Pentagon basically have that level of control over the media.
And
the mob couldn't do that. H.L. Hunt couldn't do that. The people who are dead couldn't be running the cover up today. That's how you know it was a big agency. Yeah.
Yeah, and they won't, and they will not let you touch it. They won't let you touch it.
And they give us these document releases where it's like they're re-releasing stuff they've already released with maybe one less word redacted now.
Yeah.
It's almost like to spite us. I'm sure they all laugh in the rooms when they do this. In fact, there was a time during the AARB, the Assassination Records Review Board, which was created to declassify the records after Oliver Stone's film JFK came out. Congress actually, the uproar from the people saying, where are the records, created this board. And Jim DiEugenio, a friend of mine, talks about one of the ARB members said a CIA guy was looking at a file and he's like, well, you can't release that. And they're like, why can't we release that? When he's like, give me a minute and I'll figure out why you can't release. I mean, that's the level of, they're just like, his job was to keep things from coming to the public. He's like, I don't know what's important in that, but let me find some reason to keep that classified. That's the mindset. It's so, and this is why I want to talk about how the CIA is harming America by keeping these secrets from us, because their whole existence is predicated on saving the country and protecting us, like the police to protect and serve. The CIA has their own oaths about protecting and serving. It's like, you're not protecting us when you're lying to us. This is
Absolutely.
actually damaging us. And there's
Absolutely.
nothing left to protect if it's all secrets. Then what's the point of having America at all? It's so I try and hit that point now more often when I speak.
Well, and it's important that it number one, the zeitgeist is is calling you to do it because
And
people are like enough already. They're sniffing.
yeah, stop lying.
Just stop lying to me,
Mhm,
please
mhm.
stop lying to me.
Yeah, they're gaslighting us. That's even a better word. They're just
Yeah,
gaslighting
and
us. Yeah,
and the gas is making me sick. I'm gonna fall out. I can't
yeah,
take.
yeah.
I can't take it. I. But
And it gets to me at times. I mean, there are times where it's just like enough already. And I tried to kind of walk away from this twice. Once when I finished the first book, the anthology. And then when I finished my other book, I thought I'll do a couple years of interviews and then I'm done. And you can't, it's like God gave me this for a reason. It's mine now. I have to keep sharing it. That's my role. And
yeah,
I've come to terms with that. And, sometimes I enjoy it and sometimes I don't, but I always do it because you're right. People, they're hungry. They know, like I said, I feel like truth is the medicine. Truth is what's going to cure us all.
and I think that I really, really, really believe that is where people are now. More and more and more. I think that people absolutely want to know. What did Jack Nicholson say? You can't handle the truth. I think now
Right.
more
They
and more
can.
America.
They can handle it. They can't handle the lies now. You
Yeah,
know?
and
Yeah.
that's what happened in this election.
Mhm.
I mean, my mother said half the country is going to be very angry, half the country is going to be very hopeful, no matter what happens.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's where we are, and we have to find a way to come together, but
Yeah. And
only in
that's it's
truth.
so hard because I don't feel we're in a shared reality.
We're
And
not.
I actually feel in that sense, the MAGA people, they're at least more open to conspiracy because they hate government anyway. Whereas the Democrats are like so in love with government that, oh, we can
Now,
never be the bad guys. It's
but
like,
now,
yeah, we can.
but I mean, but that's now. That was not
Yeah.
always the case. I
No.
think that I think that it really kind of there's been a transformation since Obama. That the impossible happened, and so now we trust the FBI. I still don't. The CIA
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
don't, and we
Yeah.
just keep on going with that.
Yeah.
And but
Yeah. Obama getting elected didn't change that much, but
it changed
it
nothing because that's
yeah.
the name of the
Yeah.
game. I
Yeah.
mean, it's the name of the game. And at some
Yeah.
point, you have to decide, well, am I going to live to see my children see another day? I mean,
Mhm.
because you don't know how these people roll up on you, everybody. And you are clear that if you don't play this game, you will not make it out. Because I've been reading all these different accounts. I think Jared and Ivanka had two near misses in their helicopter in the first term.
Whoa. Whoa.
Oh, no, no, these folks.
Yeah.
These people
Yeah.
play like that. What did you say? Like the CIA will infiltrate them. I mean, Robert
Oh,
Kennedy
yeah.
told you. They get
Yeah.
in your family. They marry
And
in your
I'm sure
family.
they're around Trump now and he doesn't know who they are because they all kiss up to him because they've learned how to play him. Yeah.
Well, and he also knows I don't know who to trust.
Mm. Mhm.
No one stays this relevant this long being an idiot. He
No. No.
understands people. He
Mhm.
gets the game, but he's stuck now.
Yeah.
You see,
Yeah.
he stepped through the veil, so he's in it. They're trying
Mhm.
to figure out, and I'm not making
And
excuses.
now they have no one left to blame because no Democrats are in power. They have the House, the Senate,
Well,
the White House, and the judicial branch. They,
even though
they
it's
can't blame us for anything.
well, and it's the thinnest margin of victory in the modern era in terms of
Oh,
the popular vote.
yeah,
So you've got that. You've got a lot of things that are popping off. So honestly, I don't know where anything is going, to be frank,
yeah. And
because this
I'm not even convinced the election was fully honest either. But
it
on the
never
other
it
hand,
hasn't been
I
in so
did hear
long.
that her internal polling showed she wasn't going to win.
But
So
but let me tell Lisa, you could feel that in the streets, and I
yeah,
was very honest with my audience who are still listening.
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
there's an enthusiasm that you hear and that you feel
Mhm.
when people have the momentum.
Right.
You didn't feel that. You didn't see it. And there were things that in her own with her own record that she would not, like her prosecution of young black
Mhm.
men. It's like I said she needs to get ahead of that. Get ahead of it.
Yeah.
And even if you anger some people, at least they will give you credit for having
Yeah.
answered the questions.
Exactly,
When
instead
you
of just
don't,
avoiding it.
it,
Yeah.
you
You
can't do
can't run on hope alone, it's like hope and joy is not a winning ticket? Yeah, we need hardcore reality-based people
Yeah,
these
because
days.
yeah, because eggs are $10 a dozen. I mean, what? What?
Crazy, right?
What are you talking about? No, no.
Yeah.
People can't afford rent.
Yeah. My one-bedroom apartment in LA is 2340 a month, basically,
Yeah,
with utilities. I could be buying a mortgage for a three-bedroom house back east with that, but in LA, this is all I can get?
well, let me tell you something. Don't answer your door since you're in an apartment building, because now what they're doing at this time, and they're doing it in
Mhm.
buildings here in Chicago, they're knocking on your door and they're selling like utilities, something like that. They're trying to case out your place. Remember
That's
it's
what I
a
was worried
childhood
about.
center. So
Yeah.
let them go. Don't answer your
Yeah.
door. Don't open
Yeah.
it. Don't you dare.
Yeah.
Don't open it.
Yeah. You're smart. Yep.
No, no, it's something I've learned. Don't
Yeah.
open it. Don't open it.
Mhm.
Because I live in a big building, but they're like I live in a big apartment, and there are two residents per floor, from
Mhm.
like my the floor beneath me up to the five more floors. And they've been trying to break into the buildings. People have no money.
Yeah, that's it. They're desperate and
Yeah, they're
yeah,
desperate.
we've
And that's all I can tell you. And when you look like you're not starving, they're coming for you.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
so
No, that's a
just
good
please be
point.
careful. Don't do that. Because number one, you're not homeless in California, and that says a whole lot. Because it's the most
Yeah,
expensive place on earth.
I know. I would love to retire here, but I can't afford that?
And everybody's leaving anyway because it's too expensive.
Yeah.
So fine,
We have the
maybe
best weather, and that's why. So people all the rich people come here, and then the rest of us have to leave. It's
you
so
might
not
have to go to
fair.
Nevada. I have a lot of friends who went to Vegas, and they're going there. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it's Vegas
I
is
wanna
not.
be near my dolphins. We have dolphins right off the coast.
Oh,
That's the part I would miss the most. So if
I-
I go somewhere, I wanna go where I can drive out and see dolphins on weekends and
well, now
yeah.
it's Vegas. They'll put the dolphins in the middle of the
Well,
strip.
I know they'll put them in the pools. They already have. At the Mirage, I think, or one of those hotels, you can see
Telling you,
dolphins.
that's the
It's
craziest
not
place
the
on earth.
same. I wanna see them playing free in the ocean. I wanna see the whales.
Well, you can trust me. Steve
Yeah.
Wynn will figure it out.
Yeah, true. Yeah, those hotels are nice, I must say. I like going there just for
They
that.
are, but one of my girlfriends got a fabulous place, and she's like paying under 2,000 a month, and I was like,
Oh,
"Wow!"
yeah.
But I have some other friends who live out there, and they're wealthy,
Yeah.
and but for what they are able to get, I mean, one of my girlfriends built her house for maybe $3 or $4 million. In LA, it would be 20 for what
Oh,
she
yeah.
was able
Oh,
to
yeah.
get. For what
Yeah.
for what she was able to get, and she said she'd have a little place in LA because and she lives in the Hollywood Hills, but her real place is in Vegas.
Oh
That's
my gosh.
oh yeah. I'm just telling you, it's just something to think about because also with the taxes, because people
Yeah,
are
that's true.
Florida,
That's true.
Florida's getting washed away, so people
Yeah.
people are not going there. I'm just
Yeah.
telling you, and
Yeah.
people are going to Panama.
And, Panama is really pretty. I did a cruise through the Panama Canal. I didn't get to go to Panama City, but it looked gorgeous as we
Oh,
drove by, basically, and
they're going.
that's yeah, I
They're
would
going.
consider that seriously.
They're going. They're going. Please don't leave
Yeah.
just yet. Please, I need you.
No, I'm not gonna leave for a while.
I need you.
I'll be
Please don't
around.
leave
I love
me.
talking to you because you know so much and you've got this
Oh,
great history and you're a very kind person, which is
oh,
hard to find these
you are so. I feel that way about you, and may
Oh,
God continue to bless you. And like I said, well, I love you all, everybody. So have a great one,
thank you.
everybody. But no, but I had to do